Somewhere in your yard right now, there is probably a plant you've been trying to kill for years. Maybe you've sprayed it. Maybe you've pulled it up by the roots, tossed it in a bag, and watched it come back 2 weeks later like nothing happened. You cursed it. Your neighbor cursed it. The guy at the garden center sold you something to get rid of it. And here's the part nobody told you. That plant, the one you've been at war with, has been quietly doing something to your soil that a $200 bag of synthetic fertilizer cannot replicate. It has been breaking hardpan. It has been pulling up minerals from depths your topsoil hasn't seen in decades. It has been feeding microbes, fixing nitrogen, and essentially running a free restoration service on land that industrial farming, chemical lawn care, and years of neglect had completely destroyed. You didn't know that. You weren't supposed to. Because somewhere between the rise of the modern fertilizer industry and the creation of your local invasive species list, a decision was made. A very convenient decision. And the plant doing the most good in your garden got a very bad reputation. This is the story of how that happened and why it matters more than you think. So what does it actually mean when we say soil is dead? Because that word gets thrown around a lot. Dead soil, depleted soil, damaged soil. And most people hear that and picture dirt that just looks a little pale, maybe a little dry. Something you fix with a bag of fertilizer and a garden hose. But that's not what we're talking about. Healthy soil is one of the most complex living ecosystems on the planet. A single teaspoon, 1 teaspoon, can contain more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. We're talking bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa, all working together in a system so intricate that scientists are still figuring out how it functions. These microbes break down organic matter. They release nutrients in forms that plant roots can actually absorb, and they build the physical structure of soil itself. That spongy, dark, crumbly texture you see in a thriving garden. That's not just dirt being dirt. That's life, compressed into every cubic inch. Dead soil has none of that, and dead soil is everywhere now. Decades of conventional farming stripped it through monocultures and tillage. Synthetic fertilizers fed the crops, but starved the microbes. Pesticides and herbicides moved through the food chain and into the ground. Suburban lawn culture compacted it, drenched it in chemicals, and then covered whatever was left with sod that required even more chemical support just to stay green. The result is soil that looks fine from the surface and functions like concrete underneath. Water runs off it instead of soaking in. Roots can't penetrate it. Nutrients don't cycle. Plants grow weak, stressed, and dependent on whatever you pour on them next season. And most people have no idea that's what they're standing on. So what is this plant? Because at this point you're probably picturing something exotic. Some rare botanical discovery pulled from a remote rainforest or a forgotten corner of the Amazon. But that's the thing that makes this story so remarkable. You've almost certainly seen it before. You've probably pulled it out of your garden and tossed it in a trash bag without thinking twice. Maybe you've even sprayed it. The plant is yellow clover. Specifically, a species most people know as yellow sweet clover, or Mellitus officinalis if you want the Latin. It grows in vacant lots, along roadsides, in the cracks between sidewalks, and at the edges of fields where nobody's paying much attention. It shoots up fast, sometimes reaching 4 or 5 feet tall in a single growing season. It has small, delicate yellow flowers that bloom in long clusters, and when you crush the leaves between your fingers, there's this faint, sweet smell, almost like vanilla. People have compared it to fresh hay, and for decades, the official recommendation in most of the United States has been to treat it as a nuisance, something to eliminate. Invasive, they said. A problem species. Get rid of it. But here's what they didn't emphasize in those advisories. Yellow sweet clover is a legume, and legumes have a superpower that almost nothing else in the plant kingdom possesses. They form partnerships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil, tiny organisms called rhizobia, and together they pull nitrogen directly out of the atmosphere and convert it into a form the soil can actually use. Nitrogen, the single most important nutrient for plant growth. The primary ingredient in the synthetic fertilizers that built a $100 billion industry. And this weed produces it for free. Now let's talk about what's actually happening underground, because that's where the real story is. When yellow sweet clover sends its roots down into compacted, depleted soil, it's not just reaching for water and stability. It's building infrastructure. Those roots create channels, physical pathways that allow air and water to penetrate layers of earth that have been sealed off for years, sometimes decades. Compaction breaks down, drainage improves. The soil starts breathing again, almost literally. But the nitrogen, that's the part that changes everything. The rhizobia bacteria attach to the roots of the plant and form these small nodules. Little nodes you can actually see if you pull the plant up carefully and look closely. Inside those nodules, a biochemical process is happening that soil scientists still consider one of the most elegant systems in nature. Atmospheric nitrogen, the inert gas that makes up about 78% of the air around us, the kind plants cannot use in its raw form, gets converted into ammonium, a bioavailable form of nitrogen that plants can actually absorb and grow from. A single season of yellow sweet clover can fix anywhere from 80 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Let that land for a second. That's roughly equivalent to multiple applications of commercial fertilizer. Except it's free, and it doesn't leach into groundwater, and it doesn't require a factory or a tanker truck or a credit line with an agricultural supply company. When the plant dies back, either at the end of the season or when you till it under, all of that captured nitrogen releases into the soil. Organic matter increases. Microbial activity surges. Earthworms return. The soil ecosystem, the one that took years of chemical dependency to destroy, begins rebuilding itself in a matter of months. One weed, one season. Measurable, documented, peer-reviewed results. So here's where the story gets uncomfortable. If a single weed can replace multiple applications of commercial fertilizer, for free, with no side effects, available to anyone willing to let it grow, then you have to ask yourself a pretty obvious question. Why don't more people know about this? The fertilizer industry in the United States is worth over $200 billion globally. That's not a small business protecting its margins. That's an infrastructure, a lobbying apparatus, a system with enormous financial incentive to ensure that farmers, gardeners, and landowners remain dependent on purchased inputs season after season after season. And here's what the paper trail shows. Beginning in the mid-20th century, as synthetic nitrogen production scaled up following World War II, the same factories that made explosives were repurposed to make fertilizer, and suddenly there was a lot of money at stake. The classification of certain nitrogen-fixing plants began to shift. Not in the scientific literature necessarily, but in the language of agricultural policy, in extension office pamphlets, in state weed management guides. Yellow sweet clover, a plant that had been deliberately cultivated by American farmers for soil improvement for generations, started appearing on invasive species watch lists, state by state, quietly, without much public debate. Now, to be fair, sweet clover does spread aggressively in certain ecosystems. That's real. Nobody is pretending otherwise. But invasive classification carries consequences. It discourages planting. It triggers removal campaigns. It shifts the cultural narrative from useful tool to problem to eradicate. And when the problem disappears, you know what fills the gap? A bag of synthetic nitrogen from the agricultural supply store down the road. It's not a conspiracy in the shadows. It's a conspiracy hiding inside bureaucratic language. And those are always the hardest kind to see. So here's the practical part, and it really is almost embarrassingly simple. Find sweet clover seed, yellow or white, either works, and you can order it online for about $1 per 1,000 square feet. Some farm co-ops carry it for even less. Scatter it on your compacted, depleted ground in early spring. Don't till, don't fertilize. Just broadcast it and walk away. By fall, the root system will have pulled nitrogen from the air and deposited it directly into your soil. The following season, cut it down and let it decompose in place. What grows after that, whatever you want to grow after that, will grow in genuinely different ground. That's it. That's the whole thing. No special equipment, no expensive inputs, no dependency on a company that profits from your soil staying broken. But here's what I want you to think about beyond your own backyard. Every person who scatters a handful of clover seed is quietly opting out of a system that was designed to keep them buying. Share this. Tell a neighbor. Hand someone a packet of seed. Because the most powerful thing you can do against an industry that fought to erase a plant from public knowledge is to put that plant back in the ground. 1 yard, 1 field, 1 forgotten corner of earth at a time.